My name is Ekta. I'm the author of the book, The Voice of Kali, and the co-founder of Author in Me. Every time that I do these inspiring conversations, I leave myself even more inspired by the guest I interact with and with the insightful, deep conversations that I have. And today I'm very delighted to introduce to you to Jessica Craig Brown, who also happens to be the editor of my own book, The Voice of Kali. And I couldn't have found a better person to speak about this topic on editing a book other than Jessica. Now, while I was writing my book, and at that point, I didn't know the importance of this integral part of writing for every writer, the editing as an integral part of writing, how important it is. Because looking back, I can see the draft that is published as a book. The first is I think 1/3 of what I had actually written. So that is what editing does to you. It kind of polishes what you write. It kind of enhances it. And if you are a social media freak, it kind of gives you the right filter to your pictures.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. So as Ekta said, my name is Jessica Craig Brown and I'm a non-fiction editor. So most of the authors that I work with are purpose-led women or men, but most of my authors do tend to be women who are writing a book, usually along the lines of self-help or personal development, sometimes memoirs, because they have a message that they want to share and basically they want to help other people. So that's what I do, and those are the kind of people that I work with.
Fabulous. So when did you start this journey, Jessica? How did it start for you?
So I had quite an unconventional route into editing. So initially my first career was in the military. I served for 13 years with the Royal Air Force, which is quite different to an editing job. But my academic background is modern language studies. So I've always been really fascinated in the power of words and how people use language. So when after I had my children and I decided to leave the military, I decided to pursue that passion further. So I did some training. I retrained with the Chartered Institute of Editing and Proofreading. And then my first paid work was with a publishing house, editing non-fiction books for them. So it just kind of has led on from there, really. And I haven't looked back.
Wow. And starting with the career in military, I mean, obviously you must be always connected to books to be able to think of this as a leading career. Was this love of reading, or were you always writing that led to this, or just your love for words?
So I've always, even as a child, I was always an avid reader. As I think probably a lot of editors are the same, but I do remember my childhood always being full of books. But at the time, I didn't really consider having a career that was related to books. And I joined the military, which was absolutely amazing. And it certainly has given me a lot of skills, which I've been able to transfer into my editing career in terms of communication and time management and all these kind of life skills, which have transferred over in a different kind of way. But I certainly feel now much more fulfilled in kind of my purpose, doing something that I'm really passionate about and being able to help other people put those words out into the world, because I'm not a writer, and I have so much admiration for people like yourselves, Ekta, who have this amazing mind and can share those words and really make a difference to people's lives. So being just a small part of that is really wonderful.
I find that very amazing. And sometimes I've heard many editors say that to me, that I'm not a writer. And I often wonder, I mean, you are the people who actually help writers bring the best books out, bring the work that you kind of polish is so beautifully done. And you love to read and you love books. Why is that not many editors are writers? I somehow don't understand that equation.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. There's some are. I do know some that do both. However, I think writing and editing are two very different processes. And I think they use different parts of your brain when you're doing that. I think writing is a very creative process, and editing is almost a little bit more analytical.
Technical, yes.
Yeah. And it's really hard to edit your own work because you're so close to your own writing, which is why an editor can come in with that objective view and point out things that perhaps you wouldn't have considered or seen just because you're so close to your own work.
Yes, but it's an interesting insight, and I suppose for both writers and editors, what you need is and especially for editors, I suppose you need a larger perception. You need to understand each writer in their own way, why they have written it. So this process must be very challenging, especially when you have to play the devil's advocate and tell them, this is not working. Maybe you need to do this. And especially if the writers really attached to their work, which generally writers are. How do you manage that?
Yeah, so that is one of the challenges of being editor, is to communicate your advice in a constructive way. And most of the authors I've worked with have been really wonderful and really receptive to any guidance that I've given them. But I think you do have to be really sensitive to the fact that this is a writer will have spent and invested an awful lot of time and energy in their book, and you have to be sensitive to that fact. So yes, you're obviously objective, but you have to communicate that in a way which is not, is going to come across that you're trying to do it for the greater good, to make it the best that you can, because at the end of the day, that's all we want for you, is for your words and for your book to be the absolute best that it can be. So yeah, it can be a challenge, but I think that's why it's important to form, a good relationship with each other. It's a two-way process. And I always say when I give my feedback, I say, this is my suggestions, but that's all they are. They are suggestions. It's your book. So you don't there is no offense taken. Nobody knows the author's voice better than themselves. So, if I suggest something and they feel that it's not actually, doesn't sound like them, or it's not going to feel, doesn't feel right, then I wouldn't want them to make those changes on those grounds. So yeah, it's, you have to kind of just realize that it's, this is, you're doing it for a good reason, but to not take it too personally if the author doesn't go with your recommendations.
And when I approached you and you gave me all these options, line by line editing and different types of editing. So what kind of editing is there that an aspiring writer can look for?
So that's a really good question, because there are different kinds of editing and it can get quite confusing about which type of editing you need and what order they go in. So you can probably break it down into three key editing types of editing. The first one is developmental editing. So this would be done before you've got your final draft, so throughout kind of while you're still forming your book. So it looks at the bigger picture aspects, so things like structure. If it's a fiction book, then it would look at like your character development and your plots and that kind of thing. But for non-fiction, it would look at things like structure, how much information you're giving, are you answering all the questions that are you going to meet your readers' needs, and that kind of thing. So it works on a much bigger picture level. And there are developmental editors that you can hire who will help you kind of hone that down so that you can, get your book in a shape that you're really happy with. Not everybody needs it, because if you have a really clear idea in your mind of how that book's going to look, then not everybody needs the help of a professional developmental editor, but they can really, really help you get to your final draft if you need that support. Once you've got your final draft and you're pretty much, you feel like you've done everything that you can do on your own, then you would move on to line or copy editing. So these two terms are used quite interchangeably. I just lump it under copy editing just for simplicity. So you would look for a copy editor, which is where we met at this stage.
Yes. Yes.
So this is when you've got your final draft.
Yes.
And like I said, you feel like you've gone as far with it as you can on your own, and you need somebody that's going to take a really close look at it. So like you said, line by line, and just make that make sure that your words are working the best that they can. So making sure that everything flows beautifully, so that what you're saying is what you mean to say. So it's that objective view, because sometimes we know what we mean, but when someone else reads it, it could be taken different ways. And so that's really important. And they'll look at things like grammar and spelling and that kind of thing, just tighten all that up for you if it needs to be done. Depending on what kind of book you're writing, they might do a bit of fact checking for you. They'll look out for things like inclusive language and those kind of things, and consistency issues as well, to make sure that your book is really is consistent all the way through. So you're using the same spellings and it's being presented and in a logical and structured way.
In a way, you're like the second brain of the writer's second brain, the one that's more logical, the ones that's more technical, isn't it? Because the writer can I think
so. It's like we said, it's like these two different parts of your brain, it's two different processes, which is, and a lot of the things that the editors do, it's things that you can do a bit of, you can definitely self-edit to a point, and you can look out for these things, but there will always be things that you don't see. And in fact, I'm just in the process of editing a book at the moment, which is written by another editor. So even a trained professional editor, even editors need editors when they're writing, because it's just, it's that second.
But that just reflects the respect an editor has for the other's work, in the sense that, she's coming to you, he or she's coming to you for that editing. So that there's the mutual respect that there is, because it's trusting the other person.
No pressure.
No pressure. Not everyone likes to edit the work. They love to write the books, but they don't like to edit. There's a certain section of people who actually absolutely love it. So what is it that they must look out for? How do they start this career? If you can advise them.
I think always read, just keep on reading. And especially when you know what kind of books that you want to edit, get really familiar with that genre, because then you can see what's working, what different things are happening in industry, and how is that genre evolving, what are the new trends, what works, what doesn't work, and so that you can then pass on that knowledge and implement that in your own practice. So keep on reading throughout, obviously from day one, but even once you're working, it's still really important to really keep that at the forefront of your mind. And then, later on down the line, get some training. There are lots of courses that you can do on editing. It's not a regulated profession, so anybody could say that they're an editor without any qualifications.
Okay.
So it's really important to have that for your own confidence, but more importantly, because your authors, they deserve to have that training as well, and benefit from it. So I would say those two things. And if, we're talking about children and students, then see if you can get some work experience, because there is publishing houses and, freelance editors that would be more than happy to have a chat or show them around, or, have certain work experience programs. So that way they can see if that's really something that they want to pursue as a career.
How interesting. I just want to again touch base on one thing, because of internet, there are a lot of apps that are coming in that, you can edit your work here, you can just get on with it. How much should one rely? I'm not saying that we're talking about that don't rely on apps at all, but some writer might be thinking, well, let me cut the cost and just go for this stuff. I can just do this on my own. But obviously there is more to it. Why must, in this time and age, people still have an editor as a person there to edit the work?
So obviously I'm biased, but I mean, those kind of apps and software do serve a purpose. And certainly in terms of from kind of a proofreading aspect, they can be really beneficial because they can pick up kind of like the spelling, grammar, punctuation issues. But ultimately they're not a human. So they're not looking at it from a human perspective. And for me, the editing is much more than the spelling and grammar issues. It's about understanding where that author's coming from and understanding how their message is going to be perceived in the wider world. So, an app or a software could be quite limited in that sense. I understand why, because editing is an investment.
Yes.
And, when you're self-publishing, there are lots of different costs involved. So I understand kind of the issues that, and thought process that go through a self-publishing author's mind when they're trying to weigh up what they're going to invest their money in. So I understand why, but I would at least urge them to perhaps have a chat with a few editors and just see, so they could understand what they might bring to their book and how they could help them improve it.
It makes sense because then you're speaking to a person, and then it gives you, obviously you're writing for people to read it, isn't it? And you want a person to read it and give you a better understanding. I certainly would say that if there's a book that you guys have written, anyone's looking to publish a book, they should just invest in this very essential step. So Jessica, just tell me, if someone's coming to you, is interested in getting their work edited with you, what's the process like?
Although I have many different kinds of genres in my portfolio, I've done history books and books on aviation, obviously, because of my RAF background, but predominantly so non-fiction works. And really, I guess the first step would just to be get in touch so that we can have a little chat and make sure that we're a good fit, editing process and how that works. And sometimes, I'll have people that contact me and their book won't be quite ready for me. So I can then advise on that and maybe suggest ways that they can meet other people they could work with to get it to that point. It's really a case of, we have a little chat about their style preferences and kind of who their book is for, so they can get a real understanding of
the whole book in itself.
Yeah,
exactly why they've written the book. I think that's the first question that you probably would be asking. That's what you asked me. Why have I written this book?
Yeah.
Who am I talking to?
Yeah, I think that's really important to understand the author that you're working with, and the kind of, especially with a lot of the books, they're written for a reason, for a purpose, and who are you writing this for? Because that's going to really help with the editing process. And then typically, an author will send me their draft manuscript. I'll do my edits. It will then go back to them to make any changes, any revisions, and then they'll look through it again for a final check. So I'll look at all the changes they've made and just make sure that they're happy with the final draft before it goes forward for proofreading and printing. But I really think it's important to keep the author in the loop. So once you've got their manuscript, to let them know, how the edit's going. And if, there's nothing worse than sending, your pride and joy in your work to somebody and then hearing nothing and it's radio silence and thinking, oh my goodness,
what have I done wrong?
What's happening?
What have I written? Like I was saying that with my own book, The Voice of Kali, I had requested Jessica to work with me for the 2 weeks because I only had that window to send the book to the printer.
Yeah.
And even though it was COVID time and we were not able to meet, I was very impressed by the fact that you didn't leave the book until it went to the printer. I kept sending you the drafts again and again. This is why I'm sending you to the printer. And there was always a very quick response from your side. And that kind of gave me the confidence that my work out there that I've sent out, that I've invested in, that I've put my heart and soul in, has already passed one level of it being presentable, because you want to present it in the best possible way, isn't it?
Yeah, it's peace of mind, isn't it? It's knowing that, because I think a lot of the time you have these time frames that I've set, like you had your publishing, your printing date, and it's really important to respect that as somebody that's being trusted to work on that.
And finally, Jessica, how can people find you? What's your email or your website?
So my website is www.jessicakatebrown.com. That's just my name. And my email is jessica@jessicakatebrown.com.
Fabulous. So thank you so much, Jessica. For being such a fabulous editor to my own book, which is such a huge step in my own journey. It's a dream for many people to have their books published, but I think you are one of those who would just give them the direction where to maneuver and how to just go out of this whole forest of publishing books.
That's really
lovely. No, I can say that
you.
because Voice of Kali has won awards, and I can only always say gratitude to you for your huge contribution in that work.
Oh, thank you. I always think it's such a privilege to be put in that position where you're helping that author, publish their book. And for me, Voice of Kali is such a special book. And when you sent it to me, I was on my own spiritual journey. I mean, still am. I don't think you ever really stop, do you?
No.
So it really touched me on a personal level as well as a professional one. So yeah, it is such a special book, and it was such an honor to work with you on it.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and always pleasure to speak to you. Thank you again.
Oh, thank you.